Hello everyone, we have reached 1,000 subscribers on the channel and that's a huge milestone. So first of all, thank you everybody who jumped into this. This is, if you don't know, actually a spin-off channel. I started originally with my first channel on mobile gaming, mostly around World of Warships Blitz, and I've been featuring PC games there for a while. But eventually, I've sort of found that the groups are very different, and people who play, say, competitive mobile games don't necessarily are interested in this sort of more long-running, story-driven PC stuff that I'm doing. So I split them off. So this is actually a relatively new channel, and for me, and it gave me the opportunity to explore the whole story-driven approach of making videos a bit more. And yeah, thank you everybody for the 1,000 subscribers, massive milestone. And it also means that YouTube now doesn't just take all the profits from advertising to itself, but actually shares it with me, which is always nice, given that I am actually doing this full time. And I am planning to eventually, not exclusively, but eventually live off these things, because I gave up on being employed back in January. But yeah, so you have submitted a fair amount of questions, and I'm going to go through them. They are anonymous, which I think is the right thing to do. And if you ask the question, you'll know which one it was. And I'll put chapters in the video so you can jump around if there's something that you're not too interested in. I'll slightly group them, but I don't think there's any kind of duplicate. Given that this is an AMA, so ask me anything. We're going to go from innocuous to spicy. Let me put it that way. And keep in mind that these are my opinions that you've asked and that I'll be responding with. And that I believe in an open exchange of ideas. So these opinions might be contradicting what you believe, or they might be wrong. Provably so. And I'm always happy to learn something, and to be proven wrong is a great way of learning something. So feel free to discuss, especially when it gets into the more spicy stuff. Just please do keep it civil, and appreciate that different people have different ideas, and that getting your ideas challenged is an extremely valuable experience for learning. Anyway, let's get to it. First question, where in Germany am I from? I was born in Nuremberg, and don't try to use that as a recovery question. I don't normally use the real terms for these sort of things. But yeah, I was born in Nuremberg, but at a very early age we moved north, and I grew up near Hanover, so northern Germany. In the last years, before we moved over to Australia, I was living in Cologne, which is a pretty amazing city, and I can thoroughly recommend visiting if ever you're coming around to Germany. But yeah, that's where I'm from. Next up, why did you move to Australia of all places? That's something my mother asked me as well. When I said, I have something to tell you, we're going to move abroad. She basically said something along the lines of, couldn't you find a place that was any further away? I said, not if we tried. New Zealand might have worked. But yeah, why Australia? I grew up in Germany, and I've spoken English basically since I've been an English major in high school. I've been speaking English during work in Germany. I've been working for a British insurance company, among other things. I've been working in IT. I used to be a software engineer. So English was sort of the daily language. I've spoken a lot more English than German, actually, for a long time. So we were getting to the point where we were both not too happy with being in Germany, especially also when it came to the thought of maybe having a family, maybe having a child. And we said it's financially challenging, because even though IT is a relatively well-paid profession in Germany, it was hard making do with a single salary on IT. And so we decided, you know what, let's make a big move, because after you have a child, this sort of thing isn't really possible anymore. Let's make a big move and go somewhere else. somewhere a bit warmer, something English-speaking, a different culture. I've always enjoyed exploring places, and we didn't really feel like getting tied down where we were in Germany. So we moved to Australia, and that was one reason, and the other reason was because the job I was being offered in Australia was paying significantly better, even adjusted for cost of living. The next question is relatively similar. You seem to be German. Yes, I am indeed German. But your YouTube page says that you live in Australia. I do. I live in Sydney. Do you have ties to both countries, or did you just move there for work or for some other reason? Do you still live there? Yes, I live in Sydney. I have been living in Sydney for 14 and a half years, about it, so a really long time. And like I said in the previous answer, one of the main reasons indeed was to move for work, because the salary and just general income that I was able to get in the job that I was offered in Australia as a software engineer was, even if you adjust it for cost of living, probably almost double of what I was getting in Germany. So we were able to carve out have a child and to carve out a nicer living here than we would have been able to do in Germany on a single salary. It is a struggle. But that wasn't the only reason. It was also cultural. I was really interested to see a different place. And side story, we hadn't actually seen Australia before we moved here, because we didn't have time to go for a vacation. I was still busy with wrapping up things, and we decided to just sell our stuff in Germany, pack two or three large luggages, and then make our way over to Australia, where we had never been before, and just to see how it goes. So that was us on a Friday night coming in Australia. Now, do I still have ties to both countries? Yes, my family still lives in Germany. So my parents and my sisters and their families do live in Germany. I do visit, especially that my parents are getting on in age. I do try to visit about every 2 years. It is a long flight. And as you may or may not know, that I am suffering from a somewhat milder form of chronic fatigue syndrome, long COVID, which can, if it's kicking in gear, make it a little bit challenging to do a 40-hour trip. But regardless, I am very much trying to, at least every 2 years, fly over for a couple of weeks, visit my parents, and just see how everyone's getting on there. So yes, I definitely do still have ties to Germany, but I do live in Australia, and that is where I am going to stay as well. That's where my child was born. That's where he's growing up. So yeah, this is home. And my English is, I would say, better than my German at this point. I do think in English, and I find that when I get back to Germany, the first couple of days are always difficult, especially if I have to formulate something a little bit more complicated than where's the toaster? But because I do have to sort of reverse translate from English into German until I get used to it again. So it's not that I've lost my German, it's just that I'm more used to speaking English at this point. Next one, what was the most challenging moment in your life? Hope it's not too personal. It isn't. I did say, please ask. It is an AMA after all. If it is instead of life, it can be gaming. Yes, I can do both. Most challenging moment, however, is a difficult thing to say, really. I'd say there were probably a couple of key moments where I would say that was challenging, that was tricky. So moving from Germany to Australia, making that decision, and basically just packing our bags and moving here blindly into a country that we didn't know and had no idea about. That was certainly a challenge, especially for a German, because Germans tend to be a little reluctant to deal with things that aren't planned, organized, insured, and generally considered safe. So people actually back home when I left were telling me that they would expect me to not last here and get back, because it's just, it's not German enough. It's not organized enough. You wouldn't get along with it. Yeah, that was about 14 and a half years ago, but that was definitely a challenging one. Having a child, as everybody who does can attest to, is a massive change in life. It's great. It's amazing. But it's also a massive change, and it's a real challenge that you need to sort of be prepared for. So we've been planning and preparing as much as absolutely humanly possible, and still there's stuff that you just can't get prepared for. Just the responsibility for a little human is amazing and terrifying sometimes, but it is mostly really amazing. Lastly, I would say dropping my job, because again, as a German, not being employed is hugely challenging, and making that move to say from a safe, predictable monthly income is absolutely daunting. And it's taken me actually way longer than it should have. And it really took my family to tell me, look, you have to stop. You're falling apart. Right? Your health is collapsing here. And I was at the point where after every meeting, I had to lay down for half an hour because I would sweat profusely and I would just be in a terrible shape. I had high blood pressure and I was on a large number of medications. So just getting through the day was a challenge, and it just wasn't worth it anymore. But still, it is the thought of not having a regular monthly income is just something that is so opposite, so adverse to anything that makes up most Germans, that it is really daunting. Now, it's not said that there are no entrepreneurs in Germany. There are, but for regular folks like myself who grew up in a middle class family, it's very challenging. So that was just a huge mental hurdle to overcome. And but I am in retrospect, I am very, very glad that I did it, and I'm actually realizing that I should have probably done it about a year earlier than that. So, because we have a house now, which is its own challenge. But in gaming, the most challenging thing in gaming, I think, recently I've been looking at the games I've played. I'm mostly playing historical strategy sort of stuff, with the exception of some World of Warships like multiplayer online stuff. The biggest challenge probably was, if I'm talking about Hearts of Iron 4, the biggest challenge for me was to overcome the perfectionism and embrace adversity. To say, because in grand strategy games, you have this perfect image where you'd say, this is how I want things to go. And then if this small thing goes wrong and you feel like, oh, I've made a mistake, and I've made this mistake like an hour ago. Okay, I'm going to throw this away. I'll start over. And this spoils the game. This spoils the game for you. And I think it spoils every game for you if you're thinking that way. So overcoming that kind of thinking and saying, you know what? Okay, that went wrong, but I'm gonna take the challenge that I created for myself. I'm gonna dig myself out of this hole, and I'm gonna continue this run, and I'm gonna see what I can do. This has made the game so much more enjoyable for me, and given me so much more satisfaction than trying to construct the perfect game, and then if anything went wrong, just giving up, deleting it, and starting over again. Next one. Kind of bridging the historical interest and the personal question. What's your opinion about Poland, my country? From the person who asked the question, obviously. That's an interesting one. And I actually had to step back and think, well, what do I think about Poland? What do I know about Poland? Actually, Poland is one of those countries that I feel I should know a lot more about. I think my knowledge basically sort of hovers around Sobieski, Winged Hussars, Siege of Vienna, Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and then Division and today's Poland. But it's very superficial. And I think like this sort of older medieval, late medieval, and then newer times historical period in Europe, in Eastern Europe, is something that I really want to know more about, but I just haven't had the time to study. My focus on historical studies has been First and Second World War, and more recently, modern ongoings. That we'll answer that in a later question. But I grew up in the 80s in Germany, so obviously Cold War times, and for us, Poland has always been sort of I don't know. I would say we've looked down on Poland, and just being brutally honest here, as we have looked down on Poland, and I don't think it was a conscious sort of oh yeah, this actually is our territory sort of Polish division kind of thing. It's not that. It's not an open racism or anything. It's just more a prejudice of saying lots of, there's theft going on, and this is just kind of like Soviet territory over there, and they're all poor, and it's that sort of subconscious arrogance that you find in the West, arrogance and sort of racism in a way, although it's not race-based, but just like superiority feeling, cultural superiority feeling that you still find a lot of subconscious places, a lot in the West, even today, and that is very hard to recognize and to overcome. So I haven't managed to visit Poland. I've been to Prague and Czech Republic, but Poland I haven't actually managed to visit. Definitely on my list of places to visit. I've been working in IT with folks from Poland quite a bit, and really got to appreciate their sort of determination and grit, and just say, screw this, I'm going to do it myself, and also. Like the greatest compliment you ever could get from a Polish colleague was to say, yeah, it's not completely crap. So that sort of attitude was always, it was a bit jarring, but once you got used to it, it's refreshingly honest at times. So, but yeah, Poland, one country I still really need to learn more about historically. Now that I have actually, hopefully, a bit more time once everything around here is finished and my life stops being completely crazy. Let's hop into the gaming questions. I did say it was going to get increasingly spicy. Hello, Mr. Terry. Will you play Equestria of War mod or Thousand Week Reich mod after you finish the Kaiserreich series? I have heard about the Equestria. That's a My Little Pony thing, isn't it? I am not a huge fan of this sort of collab crossover things. I know that Stakui has played it on YouTube. I've watched his videos on and off, but I just never really could get into it sufficiently. I don't think this just overlaps my interest in any way. I'd be hard pressed. So let's say, for example, I love Star Trek. So if somebody did a next generation Hoi 4 mod where you'd be playing Federation versus Romulans or something, I still wouldn't play it just because it feels like it's not the right thing. It just doesn't fit for me, right? I love both things, but not together. It's like, I love cake and I love pizza, but I wouldn't put cake on my pizza. So probably Equestria at War is not something I'm going to be doing. Thousand Week Reich, I have no idea. I will have to look into the mod. In more general terms, because this is going to come up in the next questions as well, so I'll just answer it right here. The next Hoi 4 series, I will put up polls. So I will put up polls to let you determine what we're going to be doing next, because there are plenty of good ideas. I've been wanting to do a sort of monarchist revival run as Sweden, since the Arms Against Tyranny, I think, is the mod that introduced these trees. I've been wanting. Sweden was the first country I've played in Hearts of Iron 4. I was going to, obviously, with the latest DLC, anything Germany, Europe, Belgium, maybe, might be interesting. I've always wanted to play a minor country outside Europe, and basically just let the war play out by itself, but sort of focus more on the limited goals of a single country in a shorter series. So I like the formable nations quite a bit. So I play something like Indonesia, and create recreate or somewhere in the Middle East that might be really interesting to play, sort of adjacent to the ongoings of the war, but also trying to create a hypothetical country in a sort of what if scenario. That'd be really interesting. I've been wanting to play USA. I just find the USA tree to be I won't say boring, but it's too limited in my opinion. I do hope that they'll fix USA in some point, and USA is just too easy to play, honestly. So you could play non-historical USA, but I was more keen on sort of Pacific War recreation and things. So my thinking around was that I might do a very different sort of playthrough series, which focuses a lot more. That was my plan for a USA round. Focuses a lot more on, I would say, personal stories, and tries to shorten the whole thing a lot, and sort of create fictional characters and then focus on their stories within the framework of the Pacific War, and potentially war in Europe if it comes to that. Obviously Kaiserreich has been absolutely enjoyable. I've been really happy about the lore. So I've been staying away from mods for a long time, but I'm definitely getting the hang of it. There are a lot of options. So I'll be doing polls and we'll see what wins. And that's what's going to be happening after this series. And that actually pretty much answers the next question as well. Which Hoi 4 playthrough lies after your current one? I've put a mod suggestion, but free will. Yes, free will. In the end, I'd say it's my decision, but I would like to let you decide and give, I'll put up some options and I'll let you choose. Let me put it that way. So we'll see. We'll see what we do next, but I'm sure it'll be very interesting. I have more ideas than I have ever time for, so it's not that I'll be running out. And two more Hoi 4 questions, actually. The first one, congrats on getting to 1K. Thank you. This is all thanks to you, gentlemen and ladies, subscribing. Where was I? Yeah, you play a lot of Hoi 4 videos that are entertaining to watch. Will you be doing only Hoi 4 in the future? This is actually sort of coincidence. So I started the channel with basically bringing over the two ongoing series that I was playing on the previous channel on PC, which were Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts and Hearts of Iron 4. Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts hasn't been particularly popular on the channel. There's very small viewership. So I've wrapped up that series, and I've said I'll do something else. Unfortunately, then health issues came in. We did a poll back then, and the other series that I'll be playing is going to be Crusader Kings 3, so another Paradox game. There will always be Hearts of Iron 4 to a degree, but I do want to have a second series running that is not Hearts of Iron 4, and I've actually got a long list of games that I would like to feature, and I just don't know when I'm ever going to get to it. I would like to get back at least to sort of like 5-6 videos a week, so 3-4 Hearts of Iron and 2 videos from a secondary series. But the house move thing and construction and garden and everything has to be done first before I get to that. I'm also building the new PC right now, which is a requirement for Crusader Kings because my laptop is not going to be able to handle that. I've tried. It can handle it. It's just because it's a laptop. The heat issues will cause so much noise from the fans that it's just so disturbing on the audio that I just don't want to do it. So new PC, once it's actually finished. Right now I'm still busy building my son's PC because that took a little longer than expected, and I had to reorder a couple of parts. Then once that machine is done, then I'll be doing my own. And once that is done, then I'll hopefully get to starting Crusader Kings 3. And there are many more games. Suzerain has been very highly requested. That is a game I have and I would love to play. I've got U-Boat, I've got War at Sea. I've got so many things on my list to do that I just don't have the time for yet. So I would love to make more, and I definitely want to have other things than Hearts of Iron 4, but Hearts of Iron 4 sort of is one of the mainstays on the channel, just also because I enjoy it that much. How did you come up with the idea of creating your HOI 4 videos in the format you're making them, with the storytelling? Yes, this is... Well, I'm making this up as I go along pretty much. I actually started when I did, I did a historical Soviet playthrough on my old channel way back. And I made like an intro section for the first episode. And just using some pictures and that was it, basically. Everything else from there on, because it was a supposedly historical playthrough, I've done a little bit in terms of role-playing, but not to the extent and the sort of semi-documentary sprinkling in of things that I'm doing here. So I'm still exploring this. I think it mainly came up during the Ultimate Admiral Dreadnought series, because Ultimate Admiral Dreadnought has severe pacing issues in the game, and that just don't lend themselves to making videos very much. And you just have to, you're trying to put in cinematics to make things more interesting. And at that point, you're then saying, okay, but if you're playing a campaign, there has to be some form of story arc, because otherwise you're just playing a bunch of, I design a ship, look, I shot another ship. And it just gets super repetitive after a while. So I feel like that's something that's something that really drove me there. And not to be forgotten, I do have to give credit to another YouTuber, Wolfpack345. If you haven't seen his videos, he makes sort of not in the same style, but he definitely delves into the sort of storytelling that I find super enjoyable. And I absolutely loved his War at Sea videos. They were great. And just the immersion that he was bringing along, also with the cinematics, I think that was a huge inspiration to get me down that road. And then I just thought, okay, well, what if I put historical footage and manage to weave that into things? What if I, where can I get from this, right? How far can I push this? What kind of direction can we go with this? Where else can this go? So that was a big inspiration and got me onto this road. And I'm certainly not saying that this is it. This is what I'm going to go going forward. Still exploring every time. And trying out different ways of just making that happen. But I think it's just a style that I personally enjoy more than cutting a campaign down to 25 minutes into a single video, which would net me probably 200,000 views if I did that. But I've been watching these when I started with Hearts of Iron 4, but then later on it sort of felt empty because I was just missing too much. And this is just also for me to enjoy making these videos, because I really do enjoy that. And I am always eager to carve out just a little bit of time during my day. And can I just make a bit of time to do experiment around with a design draft, try to polish the arc, try to maybe script something that these are the sort of ideas I toss around in my head outside video recording. I'm going to the grocery store. It's like, what could I do? What could I do with this? What kind of direction could we take? What kind of angle could we explore to make this happen? And the comment section, by the way, has been a massive influence as well. There's a lot of good materials and good ideas coming out of that. And as you might have seen that some of your comments actually got turned into scripts that I could just use as they were, because they just fit in so well. So thank you for that. Well, Terry, you said it was going to get spicy. Where's the spicy? Yeah, we're going to cover that. So this is the end of the gaming section. If you're not interested in cultural politics or world politics, then you can, and you just wanted to hear some personal stuff, then you can probably drop off here. But for everybody else, the first one's a nice one. What is your opinion on woke culture? Okay, so grab a tea or a coffee. Again, reminder that opinions are my own, and feel free to challenge them if they don't overlap with yours. Feel free to dismiss them if they don't overlap with yours, or feel free to say, yeah, okay, maybe there is something about this. Maybe I can't agree to everything that you're saying, but maybe there's something interesting that might influence my own direction of thought. And then, because I'm doing the same, if I learn something new that changes the way I'm thinking about things, then I'm always happy about that, because that's what life's all about. Anyway, what is woke culture? I wouldn't say that is actually a culture. I would call it an ideology. Where did this all start? I am not a sociologist or have done gender studies, or I am just an observer from the sideline. I'm not a professional in any of these fields, so these are just my opinions. Where did it all start? It sort of started around racism and discrimination, I think, specifically. And that is a problem. So discrimination on base of race, discrimination on base of sexual identity, or discrimination on base of gender. These are two different things, in my opinion. Like all kinds of discrimination on grounds of nationality. Remember what I said earlier when we were talking about Poland, right? Like in sort of this sort of internalized culture of discrimination, all kinds of discrimination and racisms and other things are bad. And I think we can all agree on that. I don't think anybody goes around and saying, you know what? No, racism is good. We want to have more of it. I mean, there might be people who think that way, but they should probably question themselves then, because there is a sort of universal human question under that. So that was sort of the origin of it. And then there was a lot of trouble in the US around killing of people of African Americans, killing of specific people like George Floyd, and police brutality, and all these kind of things. And this just really raised a lot of awareness around things, and people started to say, like, people sort of had an imagined "Are we the baddies?" moment. I say, oh my gosh, is this all our fault? And then this sort of questioning where you'd say this is a good questioning, right? So it's like, if as a German I'm asked, what do you think about Poland and Polish people? And you're starting to explore your own internalized things and say, well, what do you think about Turkish people or Jordanian people or Lebanese people? And you'd say, or Muslims, as a Christian in Germany, what do you think about Muslims? And then if you really start digging into it, you start finding that there are certain cultural aspects that you have internalized that you don't really mean it that way, right? You wouldn't go around and say, I think that's a bad person. I don't like him because he is a Muslim, or he is from the Middle East, or he's from Russia, or he's from Eastern Europe or something. But you have that sort of instinctual cultural feeling, and you say, you know what, that is actually an internalized form of racism. And the whole movement and ideology of exploring that and learning about these things and figuring it out and saying, you know, you're going around making rude jokes about women, and actually maybe you shouldn't be doing that. Yeah, but you can't take a joke, and that's where it sort of the good part ends and the bad part begins, because then once you've started down that road, and there are actually some good aspects of this, but then you start going from a useful tool of questioning like social constructs to an ideology, because enter what I would say like to call the activists. You get the professional warriors, the people who are bored out of their minds, who have nothing better to do than trying to find, the people who would, in Germany would say, the people who would put a cushion on their windowsill and then yell at the teenagers in the street to stop being so noisy. They find suddenly a platform where they can say, oh, actually, I can be an agent, I can be an ally, I can be someone who takes care of all this racism and all this sexism and all these things, and who's making the world a better place. I'm going to feel good about myself. I'm a social justice warrior. I can sit on my keyboard, posts on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and I can change the world. But in actuality, you're starting to perpetuate an ideology and a movement. Now, the other kind of people you start getting are the professional victims. And then you get identity politics, you get segregation, you get you get the victim Olympics, the sort of, but my particular combination of racial background, sexual identity, and cultural beliefs is more oppressed than yours, you start actually going down the opposite direction of where this was initially intended to be, because instead of combating discrimination, racism, and bad things, you're creating more of it. But you're just so blind at this point that you don't see it. I think another point here is religion. That's very important to make. So especially the West has become excessively secular in many ways, and have sort of done away with religion in a sort of French Revolution Enlightenment kind of way. And getting religion out of state institutions was a great thing to do, because religions have no point in being in state institutions. If you get religious leaders making decision on who runs the country or influence who we're supposed to be at war with, that does not end well historically. Unfortunately, now what you haven't done away with is the need of a person for religion. And religions come in many ways. And in my opinion, what you would call a woke culture, or this is a religion. It is exclusionary in the sense of you're either with us or you're against us. So if you don't 100% subscribe to all the rules that we've made up today, then you're part of the patriarchy and you'll be ostracized. You'll be excommunicated. Everybody who doesn't look like we think he should look, or speak like we think he should speak, we shall wage jihad against them online. We shall destroy their lives, their livelihoods, on the basis of that they are the wrong race, the wrong color of skin, and the wrong thought. So this whole thing has turned from an interesting, I would say, left liberal thought experiment of exploring our own culture and our own cultural biases into a censorious, oppressive, and racist and divisioner. Because if you say you have to hire this person because of their skin color, your reasoning being that this is an oppressed person, and as such you have to hire them even though there might be another person who is more qualified. That is racism. You are defining people by the color of their skin, and you're segregating, you're sorting people by the color of that is racism. You're doing exactly the thing that you originally went against. So I think, all in all, my personal take would be explore this, because there are good aspects of it. Be aware of the sort of anytime any kind of censorship and suppression of ideas and obvious idiocy, like historical revisionism, obvious blatant racism, these kind of things come up. You say, no, I won't have anything to do with it. And don't get yourself put into a bucket. If somebody says, are you pro or are you against it? Are you left-wing or are you right-wing? That is not a question that you can and should answer. The answer is always neither. Or no, I am not. Because they're trying to create a us versus them, my ideology, my religion against your religion. Join my jihad, or you are the enemy, and your metaphorical head shall be removed from your shoulders, sort of thing, right? So find the good parts, take them with you. I think there are good aspects in it. I think getting a better understanding of things like sexual identities, what it means for people, getting a better, just be acceptant, right? If to people who are not like you, if you meet somebody and you have a gut feeling like, ooh, I don't like that person. He's a man who's looking like a woman. That scares me. Don't be scared. Just because somebody is different and somebody believes different things, or saying that person's got brown skin and a beard, I'm scared. Don't be scared. Explore, embrace the cultural difference, learn about other people. It is a very valuable thing to do, and respect other people that think differently from you, but do not respect intolerance, because intolerance and the aversion to challenging your own beliefs is always a dead end, and it never leads to anything good. So, sorry, I'm trying not to make this too long, but I think that's pretty much rounds up that answer to that question. Actually, I'll probably close it with a quote from Rowan Atkinson. It all points to the promotion of the idea that there should be a right not to be offended. But in my view, the right to offend is far more important than any right not to be offended. The right to ridicule is far more important to society than any right not to be ridiculed, because one, in my view, represents openness and the other represents oppression. Rowan Atkinson. And given that he is British, and if we look at Great Britain and the sort of thought policing that is going on, and that's why we also can't, that's probably a good point to make. That's why and that leads into the next questions. This is an ideology that we should be wary of because of the political influence and because of the sort of totalitarian and oppressive tendencies that it brings, where people get arrested for making posts on Facebook where they say, I do not like this person, or I believe this horse is homosexual. And ridiculous stuff. But sort of the fear of the activism is pushing governing bodies both in society, in government, and in the economy, in businesses and companies and employers towards these sort of totalitarian measures at times. And I think that is something that needs to be objected to, because that is not a direction we want. An open society, and an open society means you have to be confronted with ideas that are not your own. So the whole point of making safe spaces for things is no. You should be safe from aggression. You should be safe to say that I will not be hit in the face because of what I look like, because of the color of my skin, or what's between my legs, or what I would like to dress like. Right? You should be safe in that way. You should be safe from violence. You should be safe from discrimination, and you should be safe from being bullied because of that. What you should not be safe from is to hear about ideas that you don't agree with. That is something that everybody needs to accept, that this sort of thing exists, and is part of free speech. Free speech is absolutely important and essential to our culture, and is very much under threat because not just because of this, but also because of this kind of ideology. How are we going to get spicier than that? Well, modern politics and society may not be identical to those in the 1920s and early 1930s, but there are certain parallels worth considering. As Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Do you believe the outcomes this time will mirror those of the past, or might we expect a better result this time? I'm actually going to open that with a quote from a former colleague of mine, who was a very wise man. And he, who did study history quite a bit, he used to say, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. Those who do know history are doomed to watch everybody else repeat it. And yes, you might laugh, but there's a lot of truth in that. So let's disassemble the question here. Our politics and society aren't identical to those of the 1920s and 1930s. I would say there are definitely parallels. We tend to look at the past from a sort of supremacist way, let's say. We are a modern person. I am a modern man. I am educated. I am better than somebody, say, 500 years ago, or somebody 100 years ago, because these people didn't know. These people were indoctrinated. These people didn't have information. These people were these people were propagandized. And of course, today we are past these sort of, in a sort of Star Trek-y way, we are past this sort of petty squabbles, and we are better people. We're not, right? We're not much smarter than a medieval peasant. We might have more of a basic education. We might know how to read and write. We might have a better understanding of how the world functions. But are we smarter? I would say not necessarily. So looking at the 1920s and 30s, where we were definitely dealing with themes of economic downturn, or massive economic downturn, loss of opportunity. We were dealing with political extremism and dogmatism. We were dealing with racism and anti-Semitism and other things at a significant scale, and we would deal with revanchism and these sort of aspects. So I'd say that all of this is, to a degree, stuff that can ring true today still if you're looking at things. Will the outcomes this time mirror those of the past? What does that mean? I interpret that as, are we going to see a World War III at the end of the 1930s? Now, I did mention earlier that I'm looking at not just history, but also current events, especially from a political geostrategic perspective quite a bit, because again, this is a hobby of mine. And I found that I would call it official publications that you can read normally are often very much lacking, and that you can get a lot of information on the ground to tell you a truth that you might otherwise not really have seen. So finding the connections in things and the hidden machinations behind the scenes of what you're being shown is always fascinating. So are we going to head into World War III in terms of large land battles, countries pitted against each other? We're definitely seeing a block sort of us versus them formation. We are seeing the aggressive destruction of sovereign borders. From all sides, that is. So whatever I'm saying here is true across. So we have to get away, at the very beginning, we have to get away from the notion that we are the good guys and everyone else the bad guys, because the other side thinks exactly the same way. So we're seeing a destruction of sovereign borders. Apologies for the noise outside. That's the landscapers constructing bits on the walls there. We're seeing a spread of taking down of governments and just turning countries into sort of failed states. And we're seeing extremely surprising and accelerating amounts of instability that we hadn't expected. Things like the attempted coup d'etat in South Korea. That is not something I did not have that on my bingo card element is a relatively good indicator for things going sideways in interesting ways. Now, the Second World War was sort of the large was sort of at the last large millions of people pitted against each other all over the world kind of conflict. Then we moved into the Cold War, and it was a Cold War simply because we had demonstrated that we have weapons of destruction that can annihilate countries and basically turn them into not countries. So if you throw a sufficient amount of nuclear ordnance onto a country, and there is no country afterwards. Whereas previously you could try that with conventional bombing, but as the experiment in World War II has shown against Germany, that did not actually work that well. In the end, you gotta have to send people on the ground in to walk all the way to the enemy capital and raise your flag there to make an end to the whole affair, because countries resist for a long time, especially ideologically driven ones. So the Cold War basically had a different premise. You had mutual assured destruction, and you'd say, okay, we can't do this again, simply because if we do, well, we're going to die. And not in a slow potential, maybe on the battlefield, no, in a nuclear fire sort of way. Recently, and this is not this year or something, this started in, I think, probably the late 90s, early 2000s, there has been a lot of thought of, yes, but maybe we could just have a little bit of nuclear war, and we could win that. That has a very Dr. Strangelove vibe to it. But it's sort of the idea to say, if we could do a limited nuclear war and just use it a little bit, maybe we could win. And maybe the 100 million tops, it's acceptable losses, that sort of calculation. It's called MAD for a reason. So there are definitely attempts of sort of finding ways to pit countries against each other and to be able to regain the ability of open warfare, the whole proxy war scenarios, gain the ability of running open warfare without while trying to avoid the nuclear confrontation. It is an exceedingly dangerous game, but and things can go and do go wrong very, very quickly. Now, generally for a world war to happen, people don't plan that. It's not that people say, I'm going to start a world war, and everybody agrees and say, okay, well, let's go then. You start small, you start somewhere, and then things spiral out of control, as they have done twice, right? You say, I invaded that country, it's mine now. And then other people say, oh, you can't do that. And then you end up having countries declaring war on each other. So in terms of predictions are exceedingly difficult. Saying that, I would say we are in an interesting scenario that a lot of actors want to have a third world war, but they're not quite sure yet how to go about it without having everybody die in nuclear fire. So it's I'm holding a stick of dynamite in my hand, and it's, the sparks are getting closer to it. How long can I hold this? Until I have to throw it. How far can I push this? How much can I prod the other place before they go? And this sort of mechanic, or this sort of thinking is excessively dangerous. So I would say from that perspective, we are in the beginnings of a third world war. That's just my personal opinion. Is it going to be like the last one? I think not. I think it's going to end up being a hybrid between it's going to be a hot cold war. So the US, China, Russia can't fight each other directly because they all have nuclear weapons. And no matter how many crazy people you have in the military leadership who are thinking about limited nuclear exchanges and that kind of stuff, this will end everything. So if that happens, then we're doomed anyway. We might get away in Australia here. I have a leather jacket. I have a car that runs on gasoline. So I just have to paint it black, put on some boots, and then we're good to go. But put some studs on the leather. But yeah, no. So if that scenario, if we run into that scenario, then things go badly. Right now, it's a game of chicken, and at the same time, we're also seeing that we're pushing the limits. Where in the Cold War, we're doing things that in the Cold War would have never been done, simply because out of fear and out of respect for the capabilities of the other side. We've gone from a before I get into that. So I would say it's going to be the war is going to be fought on other people's territory. So in between the great powers, and that could include Europe, but to a degree it does already. But yeah, Europe, Middle East, and East Asia are the current hotspots. And I would say we are definitely, in my personal opinion, in the beginnings of what I would say it's worth calling historically a Third World War. But it's in a way that just because of its scale, because we are talking about a Finland, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Iran, Taiwan, South Korean line, sort of. That is once all the way through. But it's not going to be a million men facing each other on the battlefield. It's more at least not of the great powers against each other, simply because of the destructive potential of weapon systems that we have today, but of third-party countries and proxy states. And we'll have other people bleed for it. Now, one thing I would like to go into here, because this is you can read doom talk about the impending end of the world until the end of days if you're looking into the right corners, right? And I think it's good to be keenly aware of the dangers, and I think people are, compared to say the 1960s, extremely underinformed when it comes to the dangers that we're currently in. Why does history rhyme to go with Twain? And I'll start out, and I think in order to understand that, we'll have to look at the causes. Why are we fighting these wars? Is it just human nature? Do we just want to destroy each other, or is there something else? I have another quote for you. I'll read it out first, and then I'll say who it was from and when. What do we all seek? New outlets for an ever-increasing commerce and for industries which, producing far more than they can consume or sell, are constantly hampered by an increasing competition. And then, why? New areas for trade are cleared by cannon shot. Even the stock exchange, for reasons of interest, can cause armies to enter into campaign. This was said by Marshal Ferdinand Foch in 1918, the supreme commander of the French in the First World War. So we are looking at, not exclusively, but to a degree, at a problem that is caused by capitalism. And I'm not going to go off and say, pull out the hammer and sickle and say, implement socialism, Marxism, and let's dig up Stalin again. But that doesn't mean that it's all wrong, right? Just because the totalitarian implementation of it didn't go too well, doesn't mean that it's all wrong. So, in capitalist systems, we are seeing we have a major problem, and that is that of a generation of rent or of interest, of value. The capital needs to be invested somewhere in order to make more of it, and it's a race between being able to create more things that create more value, and the actual interest or the profit that we're trying to gain out of the investment, out of the rent seeking that capital does. You can increase, you can make profit out of things in the real world in two ways. You can have a constructive profit where you invest money into a venture, and then that venture creates something new and exciting. That venture creates jobs. That venture pays off money to its employees. The people earn money. They can spend it on the new and exciting thing, and the cycle continues. So the economic growth, the growth of value, matches the interest that the capitalist, the investor is seeing as his own share of that venture. But you can also be destructive, because the destruction of things requires a significant amount of investment into material to wage a war. Waging a war is massively expensive, and huge amounts of industry are required to wage a war. And then after you are finished waging a war, and you've smashed everything to bits, you then have a great opportunity to invest in rebuilding all the things again. So destruction is inherently something that capital is interested in a sort of meta way. So as such, there's the pressure there's the economic pressure to capture resources. And you don't even need to be a conspiracy theorist to know that this is what it's all about. Palestine has gas offshore. Obviously, northern Syria has gas. Ukraine has great mineral resources and arable land resources. And this is not a conspiracy theory. You can just listen to people like German politicians have said it. Lindsey Graham has said it openly. We fight in Ukraine to secure the natural resources for us and to make sure Russia doesn't get them. And the Russians, to a degree, will have the same motivation. Not exclusively so. They have different motivations as well. But we are fighting over resources. We want land. We want... if you look back in World War II, Generalplan Ost, why did the Germans want to capture all of that territory? Well, to feed the population, to grow it, to be more powerful. There are other aspects, obviously. There's the aspect of nationalism. There's the aspect of shared security, where you cannot expand your own security at the expense of your opponent's security. And this is something that we've completely lost vision and view of after the perceived victory at the end of the Cold War, where we thought, okay, the world is now our oyster. The Western system has won, and we are expanding the economic colonial system across the world. We exploit wherever we want, and we get rich, and we are masters. And a lot of countries disagree with that. And have their own spheres, want to have their own spheres of influence, which is now where we are clashing about things. So there are many reasons for this kind of stuff, but it's. I think if you want to predict the future of where we're going, it's valuable to understand that no, we're not any better off than in the 1930s. The population today is heavily propagandized. And indoctrinated. The interests have always been the same. It's about national security. It's about influence. It's about power, and it's about economics. It's about the economics of destruction, the economics of construction, and the economics of resource extraction. That's what it's all about. And my prediction would be the wars will be fought in the zones between the great powers, simply because they cannot fight directly against each other without ending the world, basically. And that is not something capital wants. So there's that. Which brings us to the last question. Thanks for reading it. Love your content. Thank you very much. And I hope this generation can achieve peace, not just for our time, but peace for all times. That would be lovely. I think if we want to have peace, we have to work for it. Peace does not come by itself. So now that we've looked into the causes of these kind of conflicts, and a lot of these conflicts that you see in the world go down because of that. It's It's colliding spheres of influence. It's colliding spheres of security. It is just the general attempt to say, no, I rule the world. No, you don't. I rule the world, or I rule my part of the world. You don't get to rule that part. And it's economics. So if we want to have peace, we are actually we're actually in a good position, because a lot of the countries in the world are democratic, in a sense that you elect your leaders. And for me, the biggest benefit of a democracy is not to elect the leader, but that leaders have an automatic expiry date. So in the past, the biggest problem wasn't to get a king, it was to get rid of one. Because if you have a good king, he can be very efficient. The problem is if you have a bad one, who then installs his inbred or incompetent children, then you have to dig up the torches and pitchforks every time and cause a bloody uprising to get rid of him again. And that generally gets in the way of profit and just people getting on with their lives. So one of the really huge benefits of a democratic system, or any system that allows peaceful protest to influence politics, is that the leadership has to listen to the people, otherwise things don't go well. So how is that a benefit for us? Well, we can influence the political direction of the countries we live in, simply by voting for people who are against war. And I think we have great problems as in the world coming up. We have a changing climate, and you might disagree about the causes of it, even though scientific evidence is relatively conclusive in that regard. But we have observably a changing climate. So it doesn't matter if you believe that it's man-made or not. It needs to be fixed, or we need to adapt to it. And because it's going to cause mass hunger, it's going to cause conflicts over scarce resources like water at some point. It is going to cause mass migration, which causes tension, as we already see. It's going to cause mass poverty and destruction of livelihoods that rely on primary production. It is going to take away land that people used to live on. So this is a problem that needs to be solved. But we can't solve this problem until we have peace. Because if we're too busy producing machines of war and fighting each other with them, we're not doing anything to solve the actual problem. So if you want peace, you want to avoid all this kind of destruction. You need to vote for somebody who makes it part of their policy to have peace. And that includes peace with people you don't like. That includes to say, no, war is wrong. We have to stop this, and we have to come to a negotiated. We have to negotiate. We actually have to have diplomacy between countries, and we have to treat other countries as equally, and their interest as equally important to our own, rather than saying, "Nah, you're just barbarians. We don't treat with you. We only fight you." Right? So these political parties exist, and they are gaining strength. They come from both ends of the spectrum, so from the right and from the left, which is good because it gives everybody an ideological home where they can have where they can feel that their interests are represented, and that is how we can make peace, by aggressively voting against people who make war and who want war. And that means we need to be informed, and that means we need to learn why these things happen, and we need to because the parties that are running places, that are running the wars, have no interest in letting you know that they do so, but much more stoke the religious fervor of we're the good guys, here are the bad guys, we need to win, and ride into the sunset with our cowboy hat on our shoulders. So vote for peace, and I'll leave you with a comment with a quote from an Irish judge. This is often misquoted, but from what I've done researching, I found the origin to be a judge from Ireland named John Curran. He said in 1790, "It is the common fate of the indolent to see their rights become a prey to the active. The condition upon which God hath given liberty to man is eternal vigilance, which condition if he break, servitude is at once the consequence of his crime and the punishment of his guilt." Translated into more modern speech, that means peace is not something that's given, peace is something that's earned. And peace requires eternal vigilance. You need to, because there will always be those who want to destroy peace for profit or for power or for whatever it is. So you can't sit back and say, "Not my problem," or you can't sit back, this is solved. You have to work for peace. And the first step towards that is understanding of why we don't have it and where it's gone, and seeing through the indoctrinations that you're exposed to. Beware, learn your history, understand not what happened, but why things happened, and then accept that people today are not that different from people in the past, and their motivations might be very similar. And that might give you a good starting point to understanding why things happen in the world today, and give you a good opportunity. And if you say, "This is too much for me, I don't have time for that," just find the party who votes against war. And if there isn't any, put some pressure on, and say, "We need one." And your party that I am supporting needs to be against war. I don't care about your other politics. You have to be against war, because peace is the basis for solving all the other problems. If we can't have peace, none of the other stuff gets solved. Anyway, that has been a very, very interesting exercise. I hope my views have been somewhat entertaining and interesting for you to listen to. I hope I haven't made it too long. I'm probably at about an hour again. It is always difficult to stop talking once I get going. That is true. But my wife keeps joking about it and saying, if I'm asking you about a simple explanation of something, we'll be standing here 20 minutes later, and you've been. It's like, yes, you have to have context for the. I don't want to have context. I just want to know what's going on. That is the curse of those who read too much about history. They tend to waffle on about it. Anyway, I'll go back to doing other things now. My kids got last day of school today, so I'm going to be driving out there in a minute. But I'll get that video together. And again, thanks everybody for coming around. Thanks everybody for the interesting discussion and the interesting questions. And we'll do something again when we reach 2,000 subscribers. Until then, I'll have a good weekend, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.